the questions are complicated. I mean, I just, the morality isn't going to give you a simple answer, and it's only going to give you principles to think through. But they're hard, because it's like, let's even just take another example that you might be aware of. The Amazing Atheist has a little dog. He really likes his little dog, and so he's invested to keep the dog alive, even though the dog isn't necessarily in great shape. And there would be there'd be an argument there, is how much is he taking in kind of imposing life on an animal that might not be living a very high quality life, or is he giving in that he's been generous in terms of providing the resources or invested resources in saving this animal's life. And those kind of questions are always going to be really difficult to come up with some kind of objective way to, you can objectively look at it, but even from the objective perspective, the subtleties are just so fine that it's just really hard to come up with some flat answer. I mean, I might, in my most harsh objectivity, say, well, yes, it's all an investment based on an emotional need. If you control the emotional need in some other way, then you just say, okay, the toaster's a little bit broken, you buy a new toaster. I mean, you just don't invest in a life that doesn't have a whole lot of potential. And so the obvious answer would be you give them a humane and decent end, and you put the resources to better use in the world. There's other animals that could gain far more benefit from far less investment, let's say. So that would be my imposition of a morality, of an ethical judgment that I would say would be objective. Wow, went way over. All right, part two. What the hell? But I probably don't even have enough for a part two. But let's do it anyway. But I'm just saying, so we can go through like lots of situations in our lives where we have to make a decision about something, and so like even lying, there's lots of circumstances where, well, I'm not going to tell the person the truth because all it's going to do is cause them pain. They're not going to gain anything from it, so it's okay to lie in that circumstance. And I would probably, by my morality, say, yeah, that's fine, as long as you just have to be sure that the incentives aren't being corrupted by some self-interest in the lie, because the lie might hurt yourself in some way, and that you're protecting your own interests and imposing a judgment that it's okay to lie because, and it's just a rationalization, and that's always what we have to protect against. And Matt sort of said in his video that I said that there's no way to eradicate the influence or to control the subjective, and he sort of got it backward, because what I was saying is we can't stop the subjective from leaking into creating a potential bias, and we can't control the subjective. We can't say to ourselves, I want to be a homosexual, and then tomorrow we're homosexual. We can't say tomorrow I want to think smelly feet is attractive, and we're going to think smelly feet are attractive tomorrow. And we can't control our subjectivity, our subjective conditioning. We can't just thought it away. We can't just have a thought and say, okay, now that I understand it, I want it to go away. I mean, I could give you, somebody could be afraid of snakes, for example, and I could say, well, snakes are just this. I can give them the spiel, but the spiel is not going to take the fear away. The fear has to be taken away through experience and exposure and reconditioning. And so that's what I've said is difficult, is imposing. The rational judgment doesn't have much control over the irrational, but the rational is quite immune to the irrational if the rational chooses to be. I mean, all the intellect has to do is discipline itself against the selfish impulses, the selfish the leaking of the little selfish noise. And yeah, we were all capable of being purely objective. Sometimes it's difficult, because sometimes that objective judgment is going to be very unpleasant, because it's going to be very critical of our own behavior, our own aspirations, and it's going to trivialize things that are very important to us emotionally, or it's going to make us feel very stupid and silly and frivolous and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just saying it's quite doable. It's just a matter of the intellect saying, as a matter of principle, I'm not going to listen to my bullshit. I'm not going to be fooled by this, you know, conniving, manipulative, selfish motherfucker that lives inside of me. So in that sense, I'm just direct clarification to Matt. And yeah, I'm not saying that the intellect can't be immune, because it can be. I'm just saying that as a whole person, one part of the brain can just have complete control, and obviously the intellect just can't control what the ape and the lizard are saying and doing inside of us. All the intellect can do is control how they are able to express themselves in the world. That we can control. I mean, obviously we can control reflexes and stuff, but I'm just saying we don't have to be owned. They don't have to be the masters of our personality or ourselves as a whole. They're part of us, but they are not us, you know. And the best part of us can be substantially in control. I mean, and that's really the objective, is just to try to be. That's one of the top 100 facts. Is not to let the ape and the lizard use your intellect as a scheming tool. That's the real danger. That's when you become, I think, the most useless of human being, is when you have, all you've done is allowed your intelligence to be used as a tool by this selfish, primitive beast that lives inside of you. And that's how I would characterize a lot of humanity, because all it's doing is being driven by its cheese-chasing compulsion, and the only thing it's using its brain to do is figure out, how do I get the other rats out of my way? How do I get these walls out of my way? How do I get to the cheese first? And that's all it sees. It sees the cheese, and it sees every other rat, every other thing in the maze as an obstacle to it personally, and is for something to be used and manipulated in any way possible to get what it wants. And that's where you get this greed society, and this society of people who think they are better than other people, and who think their happiness is more of a gift to the universe than anyone else's happiness. Because that's one of the top 100 facts, is that it really doesn't, you can't objectively make that argument. Every human being is equal in the sense of that the qualitative experience they are having, their consciousness, is just, it is not a smile on their face and contentment in their soul, so to speak, is just as valuable as it is in the king, as it is in the peasant. There is no distinction. And so obviously it would be, by that morality, it makes no sense to have human beings that you spend $10 zillion on to make happy, and human beings you can't even spend 10 cents on to make happy. And what's the logic there? So that's what makes this all, that's why these questions become kind of important, about how many people we have on the earth and how many of them we allow to live in poverty, because then we all become squanderous and excessive and gluttonous, even though we're not living a gluttonous life by some relative comparison in our own country. We end up being gluttons because there is so much suffering and so much deprivation that can be repaired with so little resource, that we end up being convicted of gluttony indirectly because we have allowed so much deprivation to exist. I mean, that's why things like, you know, population control and the rest of it are critically important. I mean, these are things we must take some responsibility for the whole community of human life, because we have to, our morality has to function within that whole context.